Welcome to History Gadget, everyone. For our first review, we will begin with Notary Napoleon Bonaparte. He has gone down in history as a political and military mastermind. Authors remember him less favorably, often labeling him a dictator. However, he was also a human, an extraordinary one for sure. So I thought, why not shine a light on some of his quirky traits? So let's go back in time, shall we? Alright. Not that far. After his admission to the Royal Military School, Napoleon felt out of place among the children of French nobility and opted for self-imposed isolation. Talk about harmony in the upcoming times. He remained proud of his Corsican heritage and refused to mingle with the rest. His grades, unlike his era, were average, ranking 42nd out of 58 among his peers. Despite these academic setbacks, Napoleon firmly believed it was destined for greater. He admired Julius Caesar, and ironically became the only man since the latter to conquer Europe. So if you are struggling, just remember you never know what life has in store for you. It's hard for us to imagine nowadays that Napoleon struggled with the French accent. If only he had Duolingo, maybe he wouldn't have struggled. His quotes have gone on to inspire great men in history like George S. Carter. As a Corsican native, he could not hide his Italian accent, making him easily recognizable as a foreigner. As he got older, though, and circumstance made him change his views and cement his allegiance to France, he slowly went on to adopt French as his native tongue and delivered some of the most awe-inspiring speech in military history. As he grew closer to France and her people, he opted to change his family name from Bonaparte to Bonaparte. Falling out with Corsican leader Pasquale Paoli, the relocation of his family and his marriage to Josephine in 1796 made his change official. Napoleon is touted as one of history's great orators among the ranks of Demosthenes and Cicero, as well as a national leader. But before he was under the limelight, he authored a romantic novella titled Clisson et Eugénie, which was actually a tiny-veiled projection of his engagement to a certain Désirée Clary. This novella was never published, with the manuscript remaining in fragments until it was reconstructed by Peter Hicks, a British historian, and Emily Barton. Today, the novella is available and can be bought anywhere. Sounds morbid, but somehow it rhymes. Because when Napoleon and everyone thought the waves of revolution would finally improve peace, and Robespierre, the engineer of the reign of terror, and the morbid one, who brought a special present, Madame la Guillotine. A present not so welcome by Josephine. I mean, it's not the kind of shiny chain an aristocrat woman would want on her neck. In any case, her husband at the time, Alexander de Beauharnais, wasn't lucky. She was later saved and released by some influential friends after the fall of Robespierre. She had disdain for her name, Rose, until meeting Napoleon who would endearingly call her Josephine. She would go on to marry him and keep the name for the remainder of her life. Napoleon loved Josephine a lot and would send her romantic letters during his multiple conquests. But it was during his Egyptian expedition that, much to his chagrin, he would learn of her affair. He would nevertheless send her and her lover a strong letter expressing his sentiments over the matter. The British, however, care on their own little expedition to embarrass him, intercepted and published the letter widely, causing Bonaparte a great deal of humiliation. The couple later divorced due to her inability to produce an heir. Regardless of what had transpired, and despite his own affair and second marriage to Marie Louise, Bonaparte remained dedicated to her throughout his life and affair. And her name was the last thing he ever said before going into eternal rest. However, Bonaparte's expedition to Egypt wasn't totally in vain, and not all salt can be stayed. A Jewish champion of science and culture, he had the foresight of assembling a team of scientists and engineers assisted by his soldiers to actually make the most of the exotic trip to the land of the past. His effort culminated by the discovery of one of the most impressive artifacts in human history, the philosopher the Rosetta Stone, a granite slab written in three scripts: hieroglyphic Egyptian, Demotic Egyptian, and Ancient Greek. They probably thought it contained some fiction at first, but turned out it actually made some sense. Thank God it wasn't the scripts of the money. Yes. The stone was discovered by one of the captain after demolition and lost wall in the city of Rosetta. Later on, academics compiled a 23-volume document annotating their findings and discoveries. According to his closest entourage, Napoleon had a bad test in music to a degree he had no idea what he was ever singing at times. His tone deafness was notorious enough that it was a relief for anyone in the vicinity to be dismissed whenever he was agitated. You might be wondering if I am exaggerating, but I'm not making this up. It was that bad. Personal hygiene was one of Napoleon's pet peeves. His extravaganza would last for 2 hours every morning. His smells were fiery, like his temper. A huge fan of cologne, I bet he would have loved Axe body spray. Or the cologne being his favorite scent. His valet would soak a towel with cologne and Napoleon would wrap that around his body, rubbing it in before getting dressed in his iconic uniforms. Strange as it might sound, while obsessed with personal hygiene, once begged Josephine not to bet to enjoy her scent to the fullest. While he was of bourgeois origins, he did not shun the idea of sneaking out to find out about what the layman said about him and his regime. He even went as far as to ask passersby their opinion without them having the faintest idea of his person. He was definitely not the first ruler to do so, but it was mostly a trait shown by many greats of history. His revolutionary idea did not stop at just military tactics and political acumen. His socially assorted and experience allowed him to review and draft one of the most influential codes since the Hammurabi Law, Code Civil, or more formally known as the Napoleonic Code. It radically built the British from one of the most frowned upon people in by the British, in this country, to a beacon of the Western civilization. He eradicated the clerical hegemony on the educational job to a more scientific-based approach. He had overseen the higher education with ever more zeal, creating l'école polytechnique, which became a subject of jealousy of other European countries. He salvaged the French economy by creating a centralized bank, Banque de France, and unified the units of measure. The civil code remains his penultimate achievement as he himself stated. My true glory is not to have won 40 battles. Waterloo will erase the memory of so many victories. But what will live forever is my civil code. The British certainly fancied making fun of the man at any given occasion, but he definitely was ahead of His Majesty's service when it comes to covert operations. Even in exile, he still had faithful and loyal followers of the Empire who bypassed the imposed drives by the British, represented by Sir Hudson Law. The most notable account is how Bonaparte's brother, Joseph, had already escaped to the United States of America alongside other high-ranking officials and began hatching their plan, which involved fast-sailing sailing ships that would set off from various departure points in the South Atlantic. There were even obscure rumors that two early submarine prototypes and a mechanical share were to be employed in some of the most daring and audacious endeavors. But those accounts remain dubious as yet, mainly coming from the tales of a smuggler